Drummerly.com Unlimited Drama Series.
The words hit me like a slap across the face during what should have been a simple Tuesday night dinner. My family will always come first in every decision. You're second priority, maybe third after my siblings. Sabrina didn't even look up from her phone as she delivered this verdict on our 12-year marriage. She was scrolling through her mother's latest financial crisis while mechanically stabbing at her salad. The glow from her screen illuminated her face in harsh blue light, making her look almost alien. "Good to know where I stand," I said, setting down my fork. "Hell, I'm lucky to even make the podium." She finally glanced at me, her green eyes cold and dismissive. "Don't be dramatic, Eli. You knew what you were getting into when you married me. Family is everything." I studied my wife's face. Still beautiful at 38, but harder now than when we'd met. The laugh lines had been replaced by permanent creases of irritation. Her auburn hair was pulled back in that severe bun she'd adopted since becoming the family's designated ATM. "So, what's the damage this time?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would make my stomach churn. "Mom needs $2,000 for the mortgage. Tommy's business is struggling again, and Dad's medication costs are going up." She said it like she was reading a grocery list, completely matter of fact about bleeding our accounts dry. "We haven't discussed this," I said carefully. "There's nothing to discuss. They're family." She stood up, already reaching for her purse. "I'll transfer it tonight." That's when something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet, decisive click, like a lock turning. I'm Eli Warren, 42 years old, and I've spent the last decade building a successful property management company from nothing. I started with a single rental house and now manage over 200 units across 3 counties. I'm not rich, but I'm comfortable. Or I was. Before I became the Warren family's personal bank. Sabrina's family treated me like a walking ATM with legs. Her mother Vivian called at least twice a week with some new emergency. Her brother Tommy was a serial entrepreneur who'd failed at everything from food trucks to cryptocurrency mining. Her father Roy was a decent man, but his medical bills were astronomical. And somehow, that had become my responsibility too. The really infuriating part? They never asked me directly. Everything went through Sabrina, who would present their needs as non-negotiable facts. "Mom needs this," or "Tommy has to have that." Never, "Can we help?" Always, "We will help." But that night, something was different. Maybe it was the casual way she'd ranked me in her priorities. Or maybe it was just 12 years of accumulated resentment finally reaching critical mass. Whatever it was, I made a decision that would change everything. After Sabrina went to bed, I sat in my home office and opened my laptop. The blue glow reminded me of her phone screen, but this light felt different, purposeful. First, I called my bank, then my lawyer, then my accountant. By sunrise, I had opened 3 new accounts in my name only. I'd established a limited liability company, Warren Properties LLC, and transferred the bulk of our liquid assets into business accounts that Sabrina had never seen. Legally, cleanly, and completely within my rights as the person who'd earned the money. If I was going to be second priority, she'd never see first place coming. The next morning, Sabrina breezed through the kitchen in her real estate blazer, already on the phone with her mother. She grabbed her coffee and headed for the door without so much as a goodbye kiss. "The money's in Mom's account," she called over her shoulder. "Love you." I watched her BMW disappear down our suburban street and smiled for the first time in months. She had no idea that the $2,000 she'd just sent was the last money she'd ever move without my explicit approval. My phone buzzed with a text from Casey Morrison, my oldest friend and the guy who'd helped me install the new security system in my office last month. Casey ran a locksmith and security business, and he understood the value of keeping things locked down tight. "Coffee? Got some new toys to show you." I texted back, "Perfect timing. Let the real game begin." Casey's workshop smelled like metal shavings and WD-40, a comforting scent that reminded me of my father's garage. Casey himself looked like a cross between a computer programmer and a motorcycle mechanic, which, honestly, wasn't far from the truth. "So," he said, sliding a steaming mug across his workbench, "you sounded interesting on the phone. What kind of security upgrade are we talking about?" I told him about Sabrina's priority ranking and my overnight financial maneuvers. Casey whistled low and long. Jesus, Eli? 12 years of marriage and she just ranked you? Like I was applying for a job I'd already been doing for over a decade. I sipped the coffee strong enough to wake the dead. So I decided to change my employment status. Casey grinned. He'd been divorced twice and had strong opinions about financial self-preservation. What do you need? Everything. Hidden safes, surveillance systems, document security. If this goes where I think it's going, I want to be ready. Over the next 2 weeks, Casey and I transformed my home office into something approaching a command center. We installed a hidden safe behind a false wall panel, upgraded all the locks, and set up a discreet camera system that would make the NSA jealous. Everything was legal, everything was professional, and everything was invisible to the casual observer. Meanwhile, Sabrina remained blissfully unaware that her personal ATM had been permanently closed. The first sign of trouble came on a Thursday. Tommy had called with another business emergency. Something about needing $50,000 to save his latest venture, a food delivery app that was apparently going to revolutionize small-town dining. Sabrina cornered me in the kitchen that evening, her face flushed with the righteous anger of someone who'd been told no for the first time in years. Tommy needs $50,000, she announced, like she was informing me that water was wet. No, I said, not looking up from my tablet where I was reviewing property inspection reports. What do you mean, no? I mean no. N-O. The word people use when they don't want to do something. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Eli, he's family. This app could make us all rich. His last 3 businesses were going to make us all rich too. Remember the food truck, the crypto mining, the artisanal soap company? I finally looked up at her. How much have we given Tommy over the years? Ballpark figure. That's not the point. Humor me. How much? She shifted uncomfortably. I don't keep track of family help. I do. $87,400. That's not including the 15 grand we spent on his wedding or the car payments we covered for 8 months. I set down my tablet. So no, Sabrina. No more money for Tommy. You can't be serious. Dead serious. I stood up and walked to my briefcase, pulling out a bank statement. In fact, let me show you something interesting. I handed her the statement from my new business account, the one showing a balance of $180,000 that she'd never seen before. Her face went white, then red, then white again. What is this? That's what happens when you declare war, and I get to write the rules. I took the statement back. That money is mine, earned by my business, kept in my accounts. The joint account has enough to cover household expenses and nothing else. That's marital property. Actually, it's not. Check with a lawyer if you want. I did. Assets acquired with separate funds after an explicit declaration of priorities belong to the acquiring party. I smiled at her. Your priorities, your consequences. The fight that followed was epic. Sabrina screamed, cried, threatened, and pleaded. She called me selfish, cruel, and a dozen other things that would have hurt if I hadn't already accepted my new role in her life. But here's the thing about being ranked second. It's incredibly liberating. When someone tells you that you don't matter most, you stop trying to matter most. You start thinking about what matters to you instead. And what mattered to me was making sure that the people who'd used me for over a decade learned what it felt like to be on the other side of that equation. The next few weeks were tense but educational. Sabrina tried everything: guilt, anger, sexual manipulation, threats of divorce. Nothing worked because I'd already mentally prepared for all of it. What I wasn't prepared for was the text message I found on her phone while she was in the shower. Can't wait to see you tonight. Same place? Chaz Daltrey. I knew that name. Sabrina's high school boyfriend, the one she dated before me. He owned a gym downtown, one of those CrossFit places where people paid ridiculous money to flip tires and pretend they were Navy SEALs. I scrolled up through their message history, my stomach sinking with each exchange. This had been going on for months. Late night meetings, intimate conversations, and enough sexual innuendo to make a sailor blush. So not only was I second priority to her family, I was apparently third priority behind her ex-boyfriend too. I took pictures of everything with my own phone, then carefully placed her phone back exactly where I'd found it. My hands were shaking, but not with hurt or anger. They were shaking with anticipation. If I was third priority, let me show her what last place looked like. The Riverside Grill was the kind of upscale restaurant where Millbrook's business community went to see and be seen. Dark wood, exposed brick, and the subtle hum of important conversations over expensive wine. It was also where Sabrina had chosen to celebrate her mother's 62nd birthday, surrounded by the entire Warren clan. I sat at the head of the table, playing the role of dutiful son-in-law, while internally cataloging every passive-aggressive comment and entitled demand. Vivian held court like a queen, complaining about everything from the temperature to the service, while Tommy pitched his latest business idea to anyone who'd listen. The food delivery market is exploding, Tommy was saying, gesturing with his wine glass. My app connects local restaurants with customers who want authentic experiences delivered right to their door. Sounds like every other delivery app, said Roy quietly. He was the only member of Sabrina's family I'd ever liked. A retired machinist who understood the value of hard work. No, Dad, this is different. We're focusing on the story behind the food, the connection between chef and customer. Tommy's eyes lit up with the fervor of the perpetually unsuccessful entrepreneur. We just need initial funding to get to market. All eyes turned to me. This was the moment they'd all been waiting for. The pitch, the ask, the expectation that I'd open my wallet and make their dreams come true. Sounds interesting, I said, cutting into my steak. Good luck with the funding. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Sabrina kicked me under the table. Eli, Vivian said in her sweetest voice, surely you can see the potential here. Tommy's worked so hard on this. I'm sure he has, I smiled at her. And I'm sure he'll find investors who believe in his vision. But your family, Tommy protested. Actually, I'm not. I'm married to your sister, which makes me an in-law. There's a difference. I took another bite of steak. Besides, Sabrina made it very clear that I'm not a priority in family decisions. So I've decided to extend the same courtesy. The rest of dinner passed in icy silence. Sabrina barely spoke to me, and her family treated me like I'd committed some unforgivable sin. Which, from their perspective, I suppose I had. I'd stopped being their personal bank. But I had bigger concerns than their hurt feelings. Throughout dinner, Sabrina kept checking her phone and glancing at her watch. At 9:30, she excused herself to the restroom and didn't come back for 15 minutes. When she returned, she was flushed and slightly out of breath. Everything okay? I asked innocently. Fine, just needed some air. She wouldn't meet my eyes. We said our goodbyes in the parking lot, with promises to talk soon that everyone knew were lies. As Sabrina hugged her mother, I noticed her slip her phone out and quickly type something. I need to make a quick stop, she announced as we got in the car. Margot wants to show me a listing. Margot was her real estate partner, a sharp-tongued woman who'd never liked me. It was a plausible excuse, except for two things. It was almost 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night, and I'd seen Margot's car at the restaurant when we'd arrived. She was having her own family dinner 3 tables over. No problem, I said. I'll follow you. That's not necessary. I insist. It's late, and I want to make sure you're safe. The look of panic that flashed across her face was almost worth 12 years of marriage. Instead of heading toward Margot's office or any of the current listings, Sabrina drove straight to the Millbrook Motor Lodge, a rundown motel on the edge of town that rented rooms by the hour, as often as by the night. I parked across the street and watched her knock on the door of room 237. The door opened and Chaz Daltrey pulled her inside. I sat in my car for exactly 30 minutes, watching the light in their window, feeling something cold and sharp crystallize in my chest. Not heartbreak. I was surprised to realize I was past that. What I felt was clarity. Casey had installed a remote fire alarm system in his workshop last month, controlled by a smartphone app. The same system, it turned out, that was used in most of the older motels around town. I pulled out my phone and did something that would have been impossible 6 months ago. I triggered the fire alarm for the entire Millbrook Motor Lodge. The result was immediate and spectacular. Doors flew open as guests stumbled out in various states of undress. Emergency lights strobed. The fire department's sirens wailed in the distance. And there, stumbling out of room 237 in nothing but a bedsheet, was my wife of 12 years. Chaz appeared behind her, pulling on his jeans and looking around frantically. Several people were already taking pictures and videos, including Tommy's gym buddies, who recognized both Chaz and Sabrina immediately. I started my car and drove home, leaving my wife to figure out her own way back. After all, she'd made it clear that I wasn't her first priority. The next morning, Sabrina crept into the house at dawn.
She texted you come back to bed at 3 a.m. Last Tuesday, you told me you were at your sister's.
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
Her clothes wrinkled and her makeup smeared. She found me in the kitchen, reading the newspaper and drinking coffee. "We need to talk," she said quietly. "Do we?" I didn't look up from the sports section. "I thought your priorities were pretty clear. Last night, it's not what you think." "Really? Because what I think is that you've been sleeping with your ex-boyfriend for months, while using me as an ATM for your family. Am I wrong?" She sat down heavily across from me, suddenly looking older than her 38 years. "How long have you known?" "Long enough." I folded the newspaper and finally met her eyes. "The question is, what are we going to do about it?" "I want to work this out. We can go to counseling. We can—" "Sabrina," I held up my hand to stop her. "You told me I was second priority, maybe third. I've accepted that. Now you need to accept the consequences." "What does that mean?" I smiled, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw her flinch at the expression on my face. "It means the game has changed, and I'm very good at games." The video went viral within hours. Not internet viral. Millbrook only had 30,000 people, but small town viral, which in some ways was worse. By noon, everyone who mattered had seen footage of Sabrina Warren, successful real estate agent and pillar of the community, running half naked from a motel room. The video had been posted by Jake Morrison, one of Chaz's gym members, and Casey's younger brother. Jake had a reputation for stirring up drama on social media, and this was the kind of content he lived for. I was in my office pretending to review lease agreements when my phone started buzzing with calls and texts. Friends, business associates, and acquaintances, all wanting to know if I was okay, if I needed anything, if the rumors were true. I let them all go to voicemail. There would be time for damage control later. Sabrina, meanwhile, was in full crisis mode. She'd called in sick to work and spent the morning on the phone with her family, trying to explain the unexplainable. Through my office door, I could hear her voice rising and falling in desperate explanations and tearful apologies. Around 2 o'clock, she knocked on my door. "Can I come in?" I gestured to the chair across from my desk. She sat down carefully, like she was afraid sudden movements might set off an explosion. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, "about the game changing." "Have you?" "I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But we can fix this, Eli. We can—" "Sabrina." I leaned back in my chair. "Do you know what I did this morning?" She shook her head. "I called my lawyer, filed for separation, changed the locks on this office, moved the rest of our joint assets into protected accounts." I watched her face go pale. "I also called your mother." "What? Why?" "To let her know that the Warren family ATM is permanently closed. No more mortgage payments, no more emergency funds, no more business loans for Tommy." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder. "I also had my accountant calculate exactly how much money I've given your family over the years. Want to guess?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "How much?" $137,000. That's not including gifts, vacations, or the money we spent on your father's medical bills." I slid the folder across the desk. "It's all documented. every check, every transfer, every emergency that somehow became my responsibility. Sabrina opened the folder with shaking hands. Page after page of bank statements, canceled checks, and wire transfer receipts. A 12-year history of financial exploitation laid out in black and white. "I never realized it was so much," she said finally. "Of course you didn't. It wasn't your money." She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "What do you want, Eli? What will it take to fix this?" "You can't fix this. You can't unrank me. You can't unsleep with Chaz. And you sure as hell can't give me back 12 years of being treated like a second-class citizen in my own marriage." "So, what happens now?" I stood up and walked to the window overlooking Main Street. Down below, I could see people going about their daily business, but I knew what they were really talking about. In a town like Millbrook, scandal was the most valuable currency. Now, you learn what it's like to be last priority in someone else's life. That evening, Roy Warren had a heart attack. The call came at 7:30, just as I was settling in to watch the news. Vivian was hysterical, Tommy was useless, and Sabrina was in full panic mode. "We need to get to the hospital," she said, grabbing her purse. "Dad's in the ICU." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, not moving from my chair. "What do you mean? We need to go now." "You need to go. I need to stay here and catch up on some reading." I held up a book I'd been meaning to finish. "Give Roy my regards. Eli, this is my father we're talking about. And he's a good man. I hope he recovers fully." I opened my book to the bookmarked page. "But you made it clear that your family emergencies are your priority, not mine. I'm just respecting your decision." The look of shock and betrayal on her face was almost comical. For 12 years, she'd expected me to drop everything whenever her family had a crisis. The idea that I might not be available had literally never occurred to her. "You can't be serious. Dead serious. Your family, your crisis, your problem." She stared at me for a long moment, then grabbed her keys and stormed out. I heard her car screech out of the driveway and disappear into the night. 3 hours later, she called. "Dad's stable," she said without preamble. "But the medical bills are going to be enormous. The insurance doesn't cover everything. And Mom's already talking about taking out a second mortgage. That's rough. Eli, we need $30,000, maybe more." "No. This isn't about Tommy's business or Mom's shopping. This is life and death. Then I suggest you call your siblings, the family that comes first." "They don't have that kind of money." "Neither do I." "That's a lie. I saw your bank statements. You saw my business accounts. Money that I earn, that I saved, that belongs to me." I kept my voice calm and reasonable. "You made it very clear that I'm not part of the family decision-making process. So, the family can figure this out without me." The silence stretched for almost a minute. "I can't believe you're doing this," she said finally. "Really? Because I can't believe it took me 12 years to figure out what you were doing to me." She hung up without saying goodbye. Over the next week, the Warren family financial crisis played out exactly as I'd predicted. Tommy was broke. Sabrina's sister lived paycheck to paycheck. Vivian had no savings and terrible credit. They were forced to set up a GoFundMe page and ask friends and neighbors for help, something that would have been unthinkable when they had access to my accounts. The humiliation was complete and public. The same people who'd watched Sabrina's motel video were now being asked to contribute to her father's medical bills. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, but I wasn't done yet, not even close. Judge Patricia Harris was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who'd been handling family court cases in Millbrook for over 20 years. She'd seen every kind of marital drama imaginable, and her patience for theatrics was approximately zero. "Mr. Warren," she said, looking over her reading glasses at the financial documents spread across her bench. "These are quite extensive." "Yes, Your Honor. I believe in thorough documentation." Sabrina sat at the plaintiff's table with her lawyer, a young woman named Jennifer Cross who specialized in divorce cases. They'd filed for an immediate settlement, claiming that I was hiding marital assets and attempting to defraud my wife of her rightful share. What they hadn't expected was my counterfiling, complete with 12 years of financial records, recorded conversations, and a detailed timeline of Sabrina's affair. "Mrs. Warren," Judge Harris continued, Your petition claims that your husband has hidden assets totaling over $200,000. That's correct, Your Honor. Money that rightfully belongs to both of us. And Mr. Warren, you claim these assets were acquired with separate funds after your wife explicitly stated that you were not a priority in family financial decisions. That's correct, Your Honor. I have the conversation recorded, if you'd like to hear it. Jennifer Cross objected, but Judge Harris overruled her. She was curious about the recording, and in family court, admissible evidence had a fairly broad definition. I played the audio from our dinner conversation 3 months earlier. Sabrina's voice clear and cold. My family will always come first in every decision. Your second priority, maybe third after my siblings. The courtroom was silent when the recording ended. Mrs. Warren, Judge Harris said, did you make that statement? Yes, but it was taken out of context. What context would make that statement acceptable in a marriage? Sabrina's lawyer whispered something urgent in her ear, but it was too late. The damage was done. Your Honor, I said, I'd also like to present evidence of my wife's affair and the systematic financial exploitation of our marriage by her extended family. What followed was 2 hours of devastating testimony. Bank records showing $137,000 transferred to Sabrina's family over 12 years. Credit card statements showing purchases I'd never authorized. Phone records documenting her affair with Chaz Daltrey. The final blow came when I called Tommy Warren as a witness. Mr. Warren, I said, how much money have you received from your sister's marriage over the past 12 years? Tommy squirmed in the witness chair. I don't know exactly. According to these records, it's $43,000. Did you ever pay any of that back? We had agreements. Did you ever pay any of that back? Yes or no? No. Did you consider that money a loan or a gift? Tommy glanced at Sabrina, who was staring at him with desperate eyes. A gift, he said quietly. And did you ever ask me directly for this money? Or did all requests go through your sister? Through Sabrina. Thank you. No further questions. Judge Harris rendered her decision an hour later. The assets I'd moved into separate accounts would remain separate. Sabrina would receive a minimal settlement, enough to start over, but nowhere near what she'd expected. The house would be sold, with proceeds split equally after debts were paid. But the real victory came afterward, in the courthouse parking lot. Vivian Warren was waiting by my car, her face red with anger and desperation. How could you do this to us? She demanded. Roy is dying, and you're playing games with money. A small crowd had gathered. Millbrook's courthouse was a popular spot for local drama, and word had spread about the hearing. Mrs. Warren, I said loudly enough for everyone to hear, let me ask you something. In 12 years of marriage to your daughter, how many times did you invite me to family gatherings because you wanted me there, not because you needed something? She opened her mouth, then closed it. How many times did you call to ask how I was doing rather than to ask for money? That's not the point. How many times did you treat me like family instead of like an ATM? The silence stretched uncomfortably. Around us, people were pulling out phones, recording everything. You want to know how I could do this to you? I continued. It's easy. I learned from the best. You taught me that family is only important when it's convenient, that people are only valuable for what they can provide. That love is conditional on financial support. We never said that. You didn't have to say it. You lived it. For 12 years, you lived it. I got in my car and drove away, leaving Vivian Warren standing in the parking lot with tears streaming down her face and a crowd of neighbors recording her humiliation. But I still wasn't finished. That night, I drove to Chaz's gym. It was closed, but I had keys. Casey had made them for me weeks ago, back when I was still planning my revenge. I didn't vandalize anything. I didn't break anything. I simply turned on every faucet, every shower, every hose in the building and left them running. By morning, Chaz's precious gym was flooded with 3 inches of water. The hardwood floors were ruined, the equipment was damaged, and his insurance company was asking very pointed questions about how every water source in the building could have been left running simultaneously. The investigation would take weeks. The repairs would take months. and Chaz's reputation as a successful businessman was destroyed overnight. 3 days later, Sabrina called me one last time. "You've won," she said. "Are you happy now?" "I'm satisfied," I replied. "There's a difference. My family is ruined. Chaz is ruined. I'm ruined." Was it worth it? I thought about that question for a long moment. "You told me I was third place," I said finally. "I just took you out of the game." The thunderstorm hit Millbrook on a Tuesday night in late October, 3 months after the divorce was finalized. I was working late in my new office, a renovated building downtown that I'd bought with the money I'd saved by not supporting the Warren family, when I heard voices in the street below. Through my window, I could see a crowd gathering despite the rain. Someone was shouting, their voice carrying over the wind and thunder. I opened the window and looked down. There, standing in the middle of Main Street in the pouring rain, was Sabrina. She was soaked to the skin, her hair plastered to her head, screaming up at my building. "Are you happy now, Eli? Are you fucking happy?" The crowd was growing. People were coming out of restaurants and bars, phones in hand, recording everything. This would be all over social media within the hour. "You destroyed everything," she screamed. My family, my career, my life. Was it worth it? I could have stayed inside. I could have ignored her, let her rant until the police arrived to move her along. But something about the moment felt unfinished. I took the elevator to the roof. The storm was magnificent up there, lightning splitting the sky, thunder rolling across the valley like artillery fire. The wind whipped my clothes and stung my face with rain, but I felt more alive than I had in years. Sabrina must have seen me on the roof because her shouting got louder. "Come down here and face me," she yelled. "Stop hiding." So I did. I walked down 6 flights of stairs and out into the storm. The crowd parted as I approached Sabrina, who stood in the middle of the street like some kind of